I recently discovered that I can solve this. Now I realize that that's not that impressive of a feat for most folks, but it is for me. You see, this 5x5 has been collecting dust in my puzzle collection for the last 6 years. I bought it, couldn't figure out how to solve it, and promptly gave up. As much as I hate to admit it, I get frustrated easily. So frustrated that small, insignificant challenges can sometimes awaken an unwarranted rage in me, and something as trivial as my inability to solve a twisty puzzle can become a proxy for all of my insecurities. It's not a pretty sight, and it's definitely not a great feeling to know you're crying tears of frustration over a cube. So like most emotionally stunted man-children, I avoided the issue. And I never really had to think about it after that. Over time, cubing became a fading memory of my youth. I went to college and traded a useless hobby for what my grandma will tell you is an even more useless major. I graduated from Zoom University, gaining 30 pounds in the process. I lived, laughed, loved, and lost enough to finally learn how to love myself, and shedded 20 pounds in the process of traveling the world as a clueless 22-year-old, sorting through a decade of baggage only to find more regrets than resolutions. Then I got sick a week ago. Flu season meets Corona was the collaboration nobody asked for, but the one my family caught front row seats to. I was out for a few days with a fever, sore throat, and a level of fatigue that kept me in bed for hours on end. I was physically tired, but not sleepy. With nothing better to do, I turned to the dusty puzzle collection looming over my shoulder as I rested. I still take them out for a solve every now and then, but by and large, they just sit there on display for their audience of one. For some reason, I gravitated toward my lone 5x5 this time around. I hadn't touched it since we moved into this house over half a decade ago. With nothing but time on my hands and a mind desperate for some sort of progress in lieu of productivity, I thought conquering this challenge that I'd been avoiding since middle school would be good for my mental health. I picked it up ready to struggle, already thinking about how many YouTube videos with explanations way too fast to catch the first time around I'd have to watch and re-watch before I could figure it out. I even got the tissues ready. But to my surprise, I didn't end up needing any of those things. For reasons I can't explain, I was just able to solve it. Call it cap or just dumb luck, but the things that used to make me want to chuck this thing at the wall no longer frustrated me. Building the centers felt intuitive when they used to make me rage quit. Pairing the edges felt like common sense despite once looking like a jumbled mess I couldn't even begin to untangle. If you asked me to teach you, I couldn't put it into words. There are no algorithms I could write down for you. Hell, even if there were any rattling around this head of mine, I don't even know the proper notation for 5x5, so I literally couldn't write them down for you. It's hard to explain, but it made me realize something about life. Now, stick with me here. I know this might be me reaching. It might be the old love poet in me trying to make meaning out of the mundanity of the human experience by forming connections where there are nothing but truly random coincidences. But hear me out. Sometimes it just takes time. Seriously, sometimes the seemingly insurmountable challenges we face at one point in our lives, be it something as concrete as learning math equations, or something more abstract like opening up to people, or even something as trivial as solving a Rubik's Cube, can in time become as painless as going for a walk in the park. I keep saying it's hard to explain because it really is. There's no logic to it. No 5-step course I can shill to you here in my garage. Take me solving a 5x5 for instance. I hadn't touched it in ages and I'd never seriously tried to learn how to solve it. But one day, I just started to see it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. If you've ever solved a Rubik's Cube, you know what I'm talking about. It's the same thing with bicycles. Once you learn how to ride one, no matter how hard you try, you can't unlearn it. The way you view that part of the world fundamentally changes, and you might not be able to put it into words, but you get it intuitively. It just starts to make sense. Now, I'm not saying that it happens by accident or that waiting around kicking rocks will eventually solve your problems. I'm 99% sure it won't. And the more I think about it, I learned how to solve 5x5 by spending more time solving 4x4 these last few years. I learned how to solve 4x4 by first solving a 3x3. And it's kind of backward, but once I solved a normal Rubik's Cube, I immediately knew how to solve a 2x2. These were all puzzles I once struggled to understand. They all frustrated me to no end. I gave up on each one at some point believing I'd never get it, that it was too hard, that I was too dumb. But for some reason, I persevered. And in time, and with a boatload of help, I figured out each one. The knowledge I gained from solving one helped me solve the next. And though the connections were never explicitly laid out to me, my mind intuitively put the steps together and recognized the patterns, and the cube that once made me cry became no more difficult than making a sandwich. Doesn't mean the sandwich tastes good, though. As you can see, I'm slow. It takes me a fortnight to get through a solve. Time and intuition can only get you so far, unfortunately. To truly get good at something, you've got to put the time and effort in to learn and practice. That goes for just about everything in life. It takes time to get to the final boss. And sure, you could in theory do the hardest things first and figure it out just fine. But I'll leave that to the overachievers. For us regular folk, we have to work our way up to the big challenges by tackling the small fry first. The lessons we learn and the perseverance we develop from those struggles give us the confidence and the tools to face the things we once deemed impossible. Each step we take and every challenge we face prepares us for what lies ahead. And maybe it's not as inspiring as you'd hoped it'd be. I'll admit, it definitely sounded a lot more uplifting in my head, but it just takes time to get there. Could be a couple of days, a couple of weeks, or in my case, a couple of years. But it'll click eventually. You just have to keep moving forward in the meantime, and do the best you can. Which reminds me of a good anecdote to end on. On one of my last assignments as a student photographer, I was sat next to one of the most prolific photojournalists in the city. We were both tasked with capturing a dance performance, so we got front row media access. Normally, I'd hate shooting in a cramped theater seat, but faced with the opportunity to pick the brain of a guy living my dream, I wouldn't have had it any other way. Suppressing my urge to fangirl at the sight of one of my idols, I mustered up the courage to ask what his path was like out of college. As a senior, months away from graduating with a journalism degree and no job offers, it was constantly in the back of my mind. I figured he'd understand how I was feeling. He did. But his answer somehow made me feel better while also sending me into a mini panic attack. Turns out he worked a totally unrelated job for nearly a decade before doing anything with his journalism degree. I don't remember if I asked him why he went back to journalism, but I'd like to imagine it was a lot like me and my 5x5. Maybe one day it just clicked, and the stars aligned for him. Maybe whatever situation he was in that kept him from being a photojournalist, be it by choice or the job market or divine intervention, changed in just the right way, at just the right time for it to be a viable option. Maybe it just took time. Seeing as I'm struggling to land my first job as a photojournalist out of college, I sure hope so. I'm doing everything I can here. Sending out applications every week, lurking on job boards for opportunities to apply to every morning, waiting for responses to my emails every day. This is one of those challenges that's going to take me a while to figure out. So maybe in the meantime, I'll go pick up a 6x6. Or get a real job. That might help too.